Hi, Yvonne. This is sort of, I guess, at one level complicated to explain, but the strongman chief minister of Uttar Pradesh, which happens to be the sort of the most populated state of India, is a Hindutva leader, a right-wing Hindu nationalist leader called Yogi Adityanath. And one of the reasons that he recently got re-elected is because a large section of the population saw him as a tough guy administrator who sort of brooked no turmoil and cracked down, if needed, in a draconian way. Now, that is what we're seeing happen very, very controversially here. The administration of the Uttar Pradesh government has basically rolled out bulldozers against the homes of those whom they say were responsible for causing violence in the street protest that erupted in the last couple of days after the Friday prayers. Of course, the administration also argues that the structures of these particular homes were illegal and that the notice against them had been issued several weeks ago. But it has triggered a wide debate and a lot of anger in some sections in India, support in others, the use of bulldozers as an instrument of law enforcement, seen by many of us, me included, as extra-constitutional.
How concerned do the BJP appear to be about the backlash it's seeing, particularly internationally?
Well, I think the fact is that there were 10 days that passed between what this now suspended spokeswoman of the BJP said about the prophet and the day that action was finally taken against her. And the government, the Narendra Modi government, responded to the anger of Arab nations and then, of course, a chorus of anger from Muslim nations. What many of us are asking of the government is this: why did the government choose to respond to Arab outrage before the pain or the hurt of 200 million of its own Muslim citizens? To be clear, India does not have a blasphemy law. We have laws governing hate speech, but we're not a theocracy. We're a secular democracy. We don't have laws, that basically criminalize blasphemy. That said, you have to see this debate against the larger context of the Indian Muslims feeling marginalized, feeling like othered by the ruling party, which incidentally, I'm not sure how many of your viewers know, there is not a single Muslim member of parliament anymore on behalf of the ruling party, no Muslims as parliamentarian, no Muslim as legislators in any of the state assemblies. So I think that structural marginalization of the Indian Muslim is the backdrop against which we need to understand this turmoil.
And despite the protests, you believe the diplomatic kerfuffle is unlikely to draw any long-term red lines around the Hindu right-wing's anti-Muslim rhetoric?
I do, Yvonne, I do very much so. In fact, if you look at what's happened since the protests have actually enabled a certain sort of restoration of legitimacy to the suspended spokeswoman. The fact is that we've had a party member of parliament calling for her beheading at a public square. That may well have been rhetorical, but it is unacceptable rhetoric. The fact is that this kind of violence that has been seen on the streets, and I should add that there have been stone pelting by the protesters in parts, but there have also been chilling videos of police excess where you can see a group of young men rounded up and thrashed with batons, lathis as we call them here, in police custody. So there have been clashes where the police too has been both at the receiving end and perpetrating this sort of, an extra use of force. The point I'm trying to make is that there is now a kind of almost a support building up for Nupur Sharma, the suspended spokeswoman, with people saying that, all right, what she said was wrong, but how can that lead to this sort of street protest, this sort of violence? And there even is, I personally am a complete critic of this use of bulldozers, but there is even popular support for it. So my own somewhat sort of cynical appraisal of the situation is that you will probably see a hardening of the far-right base among the Hindu voters of the Narendra Modi government, rather than an effective, sustainable red line being drawn around the politics of this sort of hate-mongering.
Do you think we'll hear more from the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, in the coming days? Is he doing enough to address the issues? How long will the protest last?
Well, I think the Prime Minister has not spoken through this entire this sort of fracas. The government, of course, did issue a strong statement underscoring the equality for all faiths in our country. I think there are many of us who wish the Prime Minister would speak, even if he were to read out the statement issued by his government on national television, so to speak. I think it would send a message down the ranks. But the Prime Minister often characteristically remains silent when these episodes erupt. And I do not think we'll be hearing from the Prime Minister directly. But I do think that eventually this kind of unrest is something that will catch up with the image of his government, even if the more extreme supporters of his party continue to, in a sense, encourage this kind of extreme politics.
And just finally, how is this damaging relations internationally, particularly with the Arab world?
I think we have to underscore that there are millions of dollars of trade that are at stake between India and many of the countries in the Gulf. There is the issue of oil, India's energy needs that are dependent on these areas. And there are also millions of Indians who live and work in these Gulf nations and send back money. So the stakes are high, which is probably why the government acknowledged that rage. And I think that the international image to India is something that the Prime Minister does need to reflect on. We are hearing reports of cancelled meetings, street protests, enhanced security to our diplomats abroad. And as one official in government who preferred to remain anonymous said to me, India's too big to be ignored. But the question is, right now, with all that is happening, is it liked? Now, I just want to add one final point, Yvonne. There are many of us, myself included, who believe that countries with no established record on either democracy or multiculturalism should not be preaching to India on diversity or pluralism. I think these countries do not have a sterling or an enviable record at all of their own. That said, I have often urged the government to listen to its own citizens, its own 200 million plus Muslim citizens, before it in fact it kowtows to foreign powers, in this case, the Arab world.
Barkha, thanks for sharing your views with us and for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.